and this is part 2 of the DM GM 101 class that I had promised last week, but I had some technical difficulties. The stream was not working because I was ignorant to how to use Twitch. Hopefully this time we have a video feed. Is it looking okay there, George?
I will have a look for you. Hi, everyone. My name is George, and I am your instrument of disaster.
So tonight we're going to cover different aspects of encounters for the Lost Mines of Phandelver. So for all your new DMs or DMs trying to get back on the saddle of running games, hopefully
It
this will
looks
help you.
perfect.
And we have a new overlay, or somewhat new overlay, courtesy of Victor, aka Behold Gaming. He is also our regional representative of the EU, and he also is a developer. So bravo to Mr. Twitch himself. It is Victor, yay! So hopefully this looks a little better. I want to try to keep this theme. If the screen ends up being too small, I'd like you guys' feedback later. Nonetheless, I'd like to introduce George. He is a staff member, an aide in the college, which means that he helps people out. He'll run games occasionally. He will answer questions, and when he can, he'll run a couple classes. Take it away, George.
I'll try to run a couple of classes. Hi, everyone. How are you all doing? My name is George. I'm also from the EU, and I've been making my own stuff and doing certain things around the college. This college has actually rekindled my actual remaking of modules, campaigns, and everything. And it's thanks to them that I am literally making everything possible to try and make the college as it should be a big freaking instrument of disaster and chaos, and just blow the whole D&D place alight.
Yeah, so if
That's
you
my
guys haven't
that's my plan.
so if you guys haven't met George, he hangs out quite a bit in the college chat. And then we also have Fat Ninja. What's up?
Hey, what's going on, people?
Hey man, we're just getting rolling here. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the peeps?
All right. Of course, I am Fat Ninja, always chilling like a fat supervillain. I'm a teacher and aide also for the college. I run a lot more classes than a lot of people, a lot of character creation classes, sometimes mixed with Combat 101. And since I am an assistant pastor in real life, I guess I've taken on the moniker of the chancellor of the Fancy Grounds College.
Chancellor.
So guys, quickly, I'm going to ask what's happening these next 2 weeks in FGC.
Spring break.
Spring break, that's right.
Spring break is here. Games are galore and nerdiness in there.
So I'm encouraging all DMs, game masters, even new people to come on into Fantasy Grounds College. And if our friend, the pastor and the chancellor of the college, would place a few links in the chat, that would be awesome. We'd like you to join us for the next 2 weeks to do a free for all in the college. So no actual sponsored or um, planned, I guess you want to say lessons or anything like that. That's not to say that we will not help you. We will still help you, certainly. Matter of fact, we're spending this time relaxing, getting to know the community, doing impromptu classes and lessons and games. And I'm hoping that some of you out there that are kind of getting into D&D and trying to run your own campaign, that this will help you with that. And hopefully you'll be able to run a module or at least one game during the next 2 weeks. We go back to normal operating business after April 1st or Easter Sunday. So if you guys want to join us and just hang out and have fun and get to know the community, talk about gaming, talk about real life, whatever you want, man, just come on in. And hopefully you guys will be welcomed like normal. And hopefully you guys will get into a game. And I didn't plan on actually scheduling anything because when I do that, no one follows the schedule. So I might as well just let it be and let it lie.
Let it be, let it be. Sorry.
All right. So I guess we're going to get started. Do you guys have any questions about last time that we did the Fantasy Grounds tutorial on the Lost Mines of Phandelver? Okay. Any questions out in the chat?
Any questions at all? Come on, there's got to be some questions. What could possibly go wrong? You just ask a question, and we try and help you as much as we can. We answer questions. We technically try and make your lives a little bit easy when it comes to DMing. I should know. I actually meant the DM side when I fumbled up everything when I was on said program that I shall not mention here.
Well, actually, the recap just a real brief recap, is we set up the screen. I showed people how to activate libraries and modules. We did a little bit of layout, things like that. We organized so we can actually run the game. And I taught the anatomy of the module and how it's laid out. And one of the things I did during that class, the first one, is that I made a little handy list and I made it like a cheat sheet. So I popped that back up on the screen. It looks like I'm back into action. Those are links, just to shortcut links to different things. I have links also on the toolbar. So when I need to actually pull up any maps or anything important, they're all down below in the interface. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to talk about this encounter. This is usually the first encounter that the party would come across in Lost Mines of Phandelver. It's a planned encounter. It was meant to help new DMs learn how to run an encounter. It also has a lot of notes and footnotes to help you with learning how to run this very encounter that we're going to go over. So without further ado, I think I'm going to get started. So there is several ways that you can run this encounter. I think the original design for the module is that they intended for you to read through it and figure out how you're going to start the module. Well, in this case, I kind of made up my own NPCs. I found a bunch of custom maps that I wanted to use instead of the ones they give you. And in this case, for the first encounter, they do not normally give you the starting map in this Lost Mines of Phandelver. So I actually went to the DM's Guild and I purchased the map, or you can have one made. And I actually found a really nice one that I really liked, but it was too lifelike and it kind of drowned out the barriers or the landmarks on the map. So I ended up using a third-party map that I like, that also the guy who created the map is a supporter of FGC. So I believe that is Vanatus Maps, and he is an excellent map maker, and I really appreciate his work.
God damn, he's fat ninja.
All right,
Trying to
so
figure out one simple thing. Where is the goddamn stream link? He just found it. Like,
okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up the basically the encounter, and we're going to go over a particular section that often gets skipped, especially by people like me that think they know everything. But actually, I had people say, "Hey, did you even read that module?" And you know what? I actually didn't read the whole thing, but I know the gist of it. I usually play sandbox style, so I'll go through each section and I'll take out the stuff I want from that, and then I'll just kind of build my own encounters. But for the sake of all this tutorial stuff, I think I'm going to actually try to run it the way the module is designed. But by all means, that does not mean you have to run it that way. You can do it however you want. I was adjusting encounters, adding my own maps, making tables, alternate things that I can do to make this more interesting and a little bit more unique than running it straight from the module itself. However, they may not help some of you out there because you will not have the same images or the same types of changes that I've made to the module. So what I'm going to do is try to keep it as close as I can to the original. I don't want to
No.
confuse people too much, especially if you're new. So, go ahead, George.
I believe we have Rob 2E in the chat. Oh God.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
I know how that's gonna end.
Yep. You say, everybody go.
the
Hey,
grumpy,
everybody, go to his channel and be like, "Hey, what was that all about?"
the grumpy grandpa fancy grounds. All right.
Grumpy grandpa of fantasy
All right.
Uh,
So,
there, there is a question from Mike inside.
sure.
Um, he said, "What I was most curious about is what things the DM does that the players will see, or all the images and such shared via the chat window."
Okay. Well, to be honest, that's up to the DM and how the module's designed. So to answer your question, what is shared is whatever the DM deems necessary for the encounter.
Inappropriate.
So what I'm going to do is find an image for you, and I will share it to the player, but you will not be able to see it since you're not on the table. But the player side will have images such as this that I could share. So that would be something that I could share to the players. It's just for background color and for roleplay purposes. I have a map in which this would show the players about where they are in the existing realms of the Sword Coast. And also, I have this Goblin ambush map. Now, this is the main map that we're going to be using for the encounter. This is the one that I purchased third party and added into the Lost Mines of Phandelver because it doesn't normally come with its own map. So in order to show this, I would right click and click the share sheet, in which this would now be available to the party. So that is one thing that you can do to share an image or a map or even some sort of table or whatnot. So it all depends on what's happening in your campaign.
You have wonky lines.
Yeah, I see that. And so George has noticed that the lines that I have on this map are off. And if I zoom in, it's probably because the map does not match the resolution. So in order to try to fix that, I can try to remove it. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to right click on the map and I'm going to click on layers. This grid is already painted on the map, but it is also needed to have a grid on there so that the tokens will size correctly and that you'll get the true scale. So if you have a crummy image, like probably what's going on here, these will not line up very well. So let's see what's going on.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was like,
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is good to learn. So now the map is out of focus, but it does have lines already on it to kind of help give you an idea of scale. And what I'm going to do here is go ahead and line this grid up for the people in the stream so you guys can see how that's done. So we're going to assume that this is the prep work that I need to do before the encounter. And this is something you don't want to have to do on the fly. So I'm zooming in now to get a closer look at what we have as far as the lines go. And I'm zooming in pretty far, pretty hard so we can see. Okay, now I'm going to add a layer of the grid itself. So I'm going to click on layers, and I'm going to click on set grid. And now this is just a matter of practice. So if you want to set the grid, you'll start in a corner and draw this apart until you can get to a decent size. Obviously, I ran out of real estate, but this would be a way that you can, in effect, create a layer. So I'm going to zoom back in a little because I actually went a little bit too far. So I'm going to zoom out some so you could see what's going on. And then I'm going to move this map around so that, there we go. Now let's try that. Okay, here we go again. Right click on the map, click layers, and voila, set the grid.
See how difficult it can be.
Yeah, it can be very difficult. So I'm going to release this, see what happens.
Oh, it's a bit too big. There we go.
We'll see what happens. Being that it's that close, it'll be close enough. But see, the lines are not perfect because the map is not aligned perfectly.
That's perfect enough, isn't it?
It's close enough. But if you don't want to fight with this, you can get maps that do not have the lines on it already. So that's just a little caveat that comes with buying maps or making them. Some people prefer not to have the lines so they don't have to fight with that. All right, so the map is set now. Now, if I wanted to hide some of these features in the background, I can also mask these features. So what I'm going to do is right click and I'm going to add another layer, but this time it's going to be a mask layer. So I'm going to enable the mask. Now, most people just use this as a straight line, or they just kind of willy-nilly it. You can actually trace the contour if you hit shift. So I'm going to try to do that.
Trying to do it doesn't work.
And as you can see, you can reveal what you want based on how you run this unmasking tool. So if you hit shift, you can actually follow the contour somewhat. It's kind of hard, but you can do it. Or if you don't hit shift, it'll just do it in even squares somewhat. So that's a way to unmask or mask the map. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and unlock it and make it so where I am not going to see any of this mask because we're going to run this tutorial. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to take away the pointer and the mask. So I'm going to unclick this. I'm going to actually choose layers and then I'm going to exit the mask mode, which gets me out of the mode of unmasking. Now I'm going to go back to layers and I'm going to delete the mask and it's asking for a confirmation. I will say yes. So there we are, back to daylight. So in all the grayed out areas, those would have been invisible to the players. For the DM, it ends up being that they can see part of it.
Don't don't do edge to edge. Do the edge to middle of the edge, Rob.
Okay, cool. All right. And now the next thing is that we're going to pull up the encounter itself. So the premise of this encounter is that the PCs have been hired by Gundren and the Rockseeker brothers. The Rockseeker brothers are looking for a group of adventurers to help them recover something in Phandelver. And there's a whole backstory in the module itself that explains all the particulars of this. But we've already kind of got into the setup of the game in the episode 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually run the combat encounter. And I actually have a person, a live player, on my table right now that is Fat Ninja. And he is going to run the cleric, Balric Stonefist. And Balric Stonefist is a relative of Gundren and his brothers. And he doesn't know them very well, but he is like a cousin to them. So he is rallying to the call to help Phandelver and the Rockseeker brothers. Okay, so what's happening now is that the party is actually driving this cart, supposedly. So I'm going to put the group on the map. There's 2 ways I can do this. I can either drag one of these tokens individually, or I can grab this friendly shield down here, which I'm going to do that. That actually places all the players on the map as a group or as a whole. Now, I do not have the table locked, so Belric, you may position yourself anywhere you like around that ox wagon. Okay, so he's going to go up front. This is Thratic. He is a half-orc fighter, so he's leading the oxen. We have a ranger that's in the back, kind of taking up the back way, the rear part, so that no one sneaks up on him. And then Watua is a female sorceress that is now actually in the wagon, and she's kind of keeping an eye on the goods, and she's driving the oxen. So there we go. Now this is the very beginning of the encounter, and what's happening now is that there's an encounter scheduled for this particular section of the game. So if I pull that up in the actual notes, let's see. There is an alternate map that I was going to use for the encounter. And as you can see, it still has the 2 dead horses, and it's supposed to replicate this map, but it's drawn a little differently. So just kind of a heads up so you guys can see that you can use different maps. You don't have to use the same map that I'm using. Okay. So here's the index for the module that I have shortcutted down on this shortcut key bar down here. And what this is Goblin Arrows, Goblin Ambush, the Cragmaw Hideout, Cave Mouth. I'm going to go to the Goblin Arrows for now. And this explains the setup of the module and possibly an encounter in Neverwinter where a dwarf named Gundren Rockseeker asks you to bring a wagon load of provisions to the rough and tumble settlement of Phandelver, a couple days travel southeast of the city. So this is kind of where you're starting off in the actual encounter for Lost Mines of Phandelver. And then it gives you some ideas as to how to run the encounter. In this case, it says encourage the players to introduce themselves to each other, so on and so forth. So this is kind of a role play kind of setup thing. It talks about the wagon and what the valuables are on it. And then once you're done reading this and figuring out how you're going to tackle this, you click on the arrow on the next page here, and it will take you to the next section. And now it's telling us to read the following box text to start the encounter. So it gives you the encounter, which you can read out loud, or you can click this bubble here, and it actually will put the chat out in this chat box down here for the players to read. So let me see. Yep. So it gives you the text that you can share with your party. So that's another thing you can do. And then it says, if you use the Meet Me in Phandelver adventure hook, then any character who approaches to make a closer investigation, they can identify the horses and that they belong to Gundren. So that's a possibility that somebody in this group had met Gundren and his crew in Neverwinter or wherever you wanted to place them, and they may recognize the horses belonging to the Rockseeker brothers and also to this individual named Sildar Hallwinter. And it gives you the details about how long they've been dead, how they were killed, things like that. And if anyone got closer, you could read this. So go ahead, Ninja, without playing off the knowledge. We've kind of went through this before. So what is your response to the scene ahead? You have a very uppity set of oxen there. They're very, I want to say, kind of on edge.
Mm-hmm.
And you've come around this bend and you see these 2 horses lying there, and they are deteriorating quickly. And there's maggots and flies flying all over them. And it is not a very pretty scene. As a matter of fact, the stench from them is starting to blow in your direction, and it's causing the oxen to become very uncomfortable. And Thratic says, "What's happening?"
Well, of course, being a dwarf and not trusting anything, probably, I would actually be on edge myself and raise my shield and just start, going forward, being the brave dwarf that I am because the other people are probably wimps. So I would move forward.
Okay, so he chose to advance his character ahead, and I think that Thratic, being that he's a warrior himself, would move his full movement rate up to the saddle. And there's some saddlebags laying by these guys here. So he's going to move his full movement rate, which is 30 feet. So he's moved his 30 feet. Latua is staying there. She's actually trying to keep the oxen calm. And Uranus is looking around in the forest. And he says, I don't like the look of this. It smells of an ambush. And that would have been based off a check or a skill check on his survival or even a perception. So if I bring up his character sheet, I would have asked a party member if they were controlling him to roll a perception check if he was truly scanning the forest. And that is pretty much his native climate, so he's pretty familiar with forestry and things like that. So on his skill list here, he has perception. He also has nature. So one of the things that he's going to check is a nature check. And so in order to do that, he would have to roll into the dice tower, in which he rolled fairly high. It ended up being a 19. So that's a pretty decent roll. So based off that degree of success, I would tell Uranus, either secretly or out loud, I could tell him, yes, you do notice that something is strange in the way the forest seems quiet. Usually the chipmunks and birds are singing, but in this case, there's not a peep. And it sounds like a very, very desolate area when in fact it is teeming with life. The only thing you can hear are the buzzing of the flies around the horses. So he's very skeptical, and like the hair is raising on the back of his neck. So he says to Gundren, it looks like there's something wrong. Not even the animals speak at this time. And Watua says, oh, great. Thratic kind of stands his ground and he's looking around saying, well, if they're here, they're not showing themselves.
Well, if they're here, they're not showing themselves.
That's right. So what are you thinking there, Mr. Balric?
Well, Balric, being the stubborn dwarf that he is, wanting to take everything head on, he's going to move up to here. And while he's doing that, he grabs his warhammer and he starts banging it on his shield. It's like, come on out, you pansies, and fight me fair.
Balric kind of looks around, and he sees nothing but the shadows of the trees. And Thratic moves closer up to the saddlebags near the horses. And from that point, I would read this next part of the encounter. So either read it or send it to the chat, either or. But it says the saddlebags have been looted. Nearby lies an empty leather map case. So then he says, Gundren, it looks like these horses and everything about them have been looted. I do see an empty scroll case. And he kneels down and picks it up and says, there are bloodstains on it, and it looks to be that the person who ravaged this was in a hurry because the strap has been ripped on the side of the leather map case. And in the DM notes, it says 4 goblins are hiding in the woods, 2 on each side of the road. They wait until someone approaches the bodies and then attack. Well, he approached the bodies, so technically, right after he speaks, the goblins have a chance to do a surprise attack. So here's the encounter. There are 4 tokens here. Now there's 2 ways I can do this. I could have pre-placed these goblins by having them on the map ahead of time, in which every time I drag one of these tokens to the map, it checks it off and it shows that they have been pre-placed. And they are not visible yet to the party. They're only visible to the DM at this point, even though they show on the map.
Okay. Actually, they're visible.
Are they?
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, okay. Well, that's because over here, they are not on the combat tracker yet. And that's because they should have been pre-placed ahead of time. And then that would not be an issue. So if I click on it, now they are not visible because they were in the middle of being placed. And that's why they showed up first. So in this form of an encounter, you want to have this done ahead of time. So when you bring up this map, you're not going to go through this issue. So once I place them, I hit this down arrow and it sent them over to the combat tracker. And that's the way that this encounter would have been set up if it had been planned. However, I could have done another tactic in which I'm going to unplace all the goblins. I'm going to delete them off the map.
To answer a question in chat, yes, you can place them before you show the map to the players.
Correct.
Normally, when the DM gets ready to set up, like Layroom was saying, you can place them wherever you want, and then when you activate the encounter through the encounter placement pin, it'll automatically put them in the combat tracker, and it will automatically have them masked, hidden away so the PCs cannot see them until the DM wants them to be visible.
Right. Another thing I'm going to do is for the menu, I'm going to delete all the hostiles. So they're all gone now. So whenever you make changes like this, you have to delete the tokens, you have to unset the encounter, and you have to delete the combat tracker. You can't do one or just the other. It has to all be done in order to make it right. So in this case, since I didn't have this prepared, the correct way would have been to actually just send the creatures to the combat tracker with no placement ahead of time, in which now they are defaulted to hidden. And now I will drag these goblins to the map from the token icon below. So there's all 4 of them now. They're not placed, but they're still on the combat encounter map. So now what I'm going to do is place them. Okay, so now they're all placed. And they are still not visible. But it says that in here for the encounter of the goblins, it'll say in this last Mines of Phandelver module, it's saying that 4 goblins are hiding in the woods, 2 on each side of the road. So I've set up 2 different groups. It says that they wait until someone approaches the bodies and then attack. Well, he approached the bodies of the horses. And so what this says is, okay, go ahead and pop up the encounter, which we've already looked at, and that's there. It says review the goblin stat block. So what they're talking about for Appendix B is that the goblins are hiding and you have to know their stealth skill modifier. So for here, I'm going to pull up one of the goblins, and that has their stealth modifier here, which has a +6. So I'm going to roll that, and it's going to have to beat the party's passive perception. So in the party sheet, which is here, I can roll a perception check for the whole party. So let me see. Here's your perception. I'll put a passive perception of 10. You can adjust that accordingly. In this case, I'm just setting it at 10. It's like a 50-50 chance to detect these guys. So I'm going to roll the passive perception. In this case, I am not going to show the results because I don't want the party to see what's going on. So I'm making a perception check for all the party members at once.
Question from the chat. Walking Dude said it asked, "Is this the first encounter
Yes.
in the module?" Yeah.
Yep, it's the very first encounter unless you put in your own. So on your way from Neverwinter or wherever you start from to this point, you can put in your own encounters. It's just a matter of how you want to do your game. But your encounters don't always have to be combat. They could just be meeting other people along the road. Maybe you see a caravan that's coming from Phandelver to the place of origin where you'd come from, and it gave you a warning about some trouble ahead. So it's all how you want to run your story. But the way the module is written is you leave the city, you end up about here, and this is where the ambush takes place. So right now, as you can see, everybody and their mom made their skill perception check for. So it says success, and what that did is it rolled their passive perception. Now that means that everyone here succeeded on that check. Well, I still have to roll the goblins roll, in which I need to do that now. So if the goblins roll over these numbers, then they will be successful in their ambush. So this is a contested roll. So it says check to see who, if anyone, is surprised. The party cannot be surprised, or the party cannot surprise the goblins, but the goblins might surprise some of the characters. So now it's saying makes a dexterity or a stealth check for the goblins, rolling for all of the goblins at once. So you roll a d20 and you add the goblin stealth modifier of +6 to the roll. So let's see what happens. So now I'm going to roll for the goblins. Okay, I can just use this stat block because it's the same for all of them. So here's a dexterity check. Now I need to add +6 to the roll, or I can roll this stealth roll here, which is a stealth +6. And if you notice, when I highlight that, or my hand is over it, I'm just mousing over, I'm not clicking on it. It actually says stealth +6. So I'm going to roll this in the dice tower, just so that I get used to the fact that skill checks are to be done in the dice tower. Okay, so there was the number 10. So the only one surprised out of this group would be Thratic, if anything. And it's a tie. So being that I'm a nice DM, I would give Thratic probably the benefit of the doubt since his friends are not surprised. Now, if there's more people surprised and there was a lot more ties happening here, I would just determine it based on my judgment. So nobody is surprised here. So they already knew from Aranis's warning. Plus, Aranis also noticed that the animals and the birds were not chirping in the background doing their normal thing. And not to mention that there's a sign of skirmish here, probably footprints, any number of clues that you can add in as a DM to give away the fact that these goblins are hidden in this area. Now, depending on how you run and how lenient you are, you could automatically give the goblins surprise. So that means they would get to attack first and probably have advantage and things like that. Or you can automatically say, hey, there's footprints around, and do kind of like what I did and said, hey, this guy who's native to these woods notices the signs. He notices that the oxen are restless. He also notices that the arrows, which may have been from a certain clan that he's aware of, and I can roll a survival check and say, or even just a history check, and he would know that the arrows belong to the Cragmaw goblins. So that's another piece of information. But as the information level goes up, I may make the skill challenge more difficult. So for him to know that exact knowledge about these goblins, I would have made the difficulty around 15. So let me see if he can even determine that these, based on these arrows, that they are the Cragmaw goblins. So I'm going to pull up his character sheet. Now, in a real game, your players would be doing this, and you would just ask your player to roll these skill checks in the dice tower. But being that we don't have 3 or 4 players on the table. We have 1. I'm going to do some of these skill checks myself. So here we go. I'm going to say a perception check, but it has to be done with the dice tower. And so we're going to roll the perception. And what do you know? It's a 20. Woo! So not only does he know the name of the goblins, he shouts out a warning. Cragmaw goblins, draw your weapons. And as soon as he says that, the goblins burst out of the woods with their bow and arrows and target the party. And so now we're going to roll initiative based on that data.
Cobra, la 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 la.
Right now I'm deleting all the old initiatives that were on here.
All right.
And I'm going to re-roll initiative. So go ahead, Balric, and roll your initiative.
All right.
So Balric rolled a 13, and so that places him on the initiative round in the order that the numbers, the higher the number, basically, the more likelihood that you're going to go first. So right now he's first because no one else has rolled yet. So the goblins, I'm going to roll for them, and the rest of the NPCs. So you can do that by clicking menu. You can roll initiative, and you can roll for everyone, or just the PCs, or just all initiative. I'm going to roll for everyone, and I'm going to remember that Balric had 13. So if it changes that, I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to click roll all initiatives, and it re-rolled, and now everyone's got their place. And now I'm going to change Balric's to 13. Oops. All right, sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to change this to 13. All right, so now he has a higher initiative roll, and so he isn't last anymore. It looks like Uranus is last. And I will justify that by saying that he had to draw his bow from his pack, or from the back of his shoulder. So it looks like Goblin number 2 goes first. And so I'm going to click on Goblin 2. And there is Goblin number 2. He's up here in the corner. So when I clicked on this token, or this icon here in the combat tracker, it actually highlighted Goblin number 2. So if you ever get lost as to where these guys are in the combat tracker, you just click on the token or the little icon there, and it will highlight which ones are being selected. So in this case, it's Goblin 2. Now Goblin 2 had all these guys had their bow and arrows out, so he's going to make a missile attack. So in this case, he has a 15-foot distance to go. So he can strike Uranus with his bow and arrow. So I'm going to click on the attack icon, which is the sword, or the offense. And he has a short bow, and it has an attack roll of +4. It says the range and the damage. So he is going to attack the ranger that's in the rear behind the 2 oxen cart. And I do that by just dragging this over to the actual token that he's attacking. So Goblin 2 is attacking Uranus the ranger. And that's a big miss. So instead of saying, hey, you rolled a 2, you missed, I would say the goblin fumbles through his pack to pull out his arrow, and at the last second tries to shoot off an arrow and actually hits the branches and falls short. So that's his attack. I mean, that was almost a fumble. He rolled a 2. So based on
fumbled.
yeah, so based on degrees of success or failure, I would describe, or possibly describe, what happened in that particular scenario. Now, you don't have to do this every round and every turn, but it makes it more interesting instead of just saying, hey, you rolled a 2, you missed. I kind of think that gets kind of monotonous after a while. I think it's okay occasionally, But when you're actually trying to tell a story, it would be better to describe what the goblin did as opposed to what number he got. So that's just a suggestion. Initially, when you're first starting off, you may want to just give numbers out so you get familiar with the mechanics of the game. But just to make this more fun and interesting, try to get in the mood and the mindset of the creatures that are attacking. So right now they think they have the upper hand, the advantage, and they are, being a bunch of stinkers here. So there we go. And matter of fact, all their positions are pretty much revealed. So I'm going to basically mask them. So now all the positions are located. That means either by movement or sound that the party knows about where they're at. Some of them have cover, obviously, so you have to keep that in mind. And cover could be partial or full cover, which are these modifiers down below here. So just keep that in mind. You have minuses and pluses, advantage and disadvantage as well.
And butthole and in butthole.
That's right. All right, so the next attack or the next turn, you see, we have this guy, this goblin number 2. He did his attack. Now he can move. So I think he's going to move this way to get a better vantage point of Uranus. And the next turn is Watua. So Watua says, she goes, crap, goblins. So she readies a spell. She's a sorceress.
Goblins.
Yes, that's what she says. So this character has quite a few spells at her disposal. She is a sorceress, so she can choose to do her, use a quarterstaff or her light crossbow. But I think that being that the situation is kind of dire, I think she will basically she's going to ready her action. So if anyone comes near the cart, she's going to blast them. So she's going to actually say, I'm going to ready. And so this is an action here.
And so while you're doing that, there's some in the chat here. Yes, Lyroon could have dragged the dice over the creature in the combat tracker as well as the battle map.
Correct. There are other ways to do that. All right, so basically, she's going to perform the ready action. So I'm going to click on this effect. It is applied to herself. And that gives me an indicator that she has readied herself for any particular situation. So the ready action in this case is if any goblin comes near her or the cart, she's blasting them with one of her spells. So in this case, she declared magic missile. So if anyone comes near, she's going to attack them with magic missile. So that would end her turn. She's not moving. She's just trying to keep the oxen from running. And she has readied the magic missile spell. So that is her turn. So now I'm going to click the advance button, next actor. Now it's going to goblin number 3. So that would be this goblin down here. As you can see, it's highlighted. And I have the options turned on to where the map will focus near where the next actor is. There's a way you can turn that on or off. So right now, if the map was way over here, it would go jump back here to focus on this particular NPC combatant. So this guy steps out and he yells some kind of goblin war cry. And if I had it set up properly, I would actually change the language in here and have him say something in goblin. But being that I don't have that set right now, I'm not going to bother with it. And he's going to yell something in goblin. And anybody who had goblin in their languages on their abilities tab, if they had goblin in here anywhere, they would be able to understand what he said. But in this case, I'm just going to assume that either they do or don't have goblin. Doesn't matter because they're in the middle of a battle, so they don't care at the moment. All right, so he steps out and he takes a bow shot at him by drawing his bow, pulls out an arrow, and the arrow has a similar shaft as these here, so it must belong to these guys. And he's going to lean into the attack and shoot straight at Thratic. So there again, someone had asked if you could do this attack from the combat tracker. You certainly could. So instead of dropping it on him here, I could, in effect, take this short bow, drop this attack on Thratic right here. And it hit. So now I could do the same thing with the damage. And the arrow zings through the air, zips by, and nips him on the shoulder and really pisses him off. So he is not happy. What's the sound that he makes, George? So that's his turn. That ends his turn. So now it goes to Goblin 1. He's sitting on this trailhead here, and he's contemplating his move. So I think that he really believes still that they have the advantage. So I'm going to have him try to hide and stealth closer to make a sneak attack on Thratic. And goblins are pretty shifty like that. So I'm going to pull up his stat block here. And there again, the stealth is +6. So he's going to hide in those trees and try to sneak his way over closer to Thratic so that he's not being blocked by the trees for his shot. Otherwise, he would get a disadvantage, or Thratic would get like a cover. So let's see what he does. Okay, so he's going to try to sneak over to Thratic or closer to him. And he fails. So he's sneaking over, or he thinks he's sneaking over, and he stops there and he pulls out his bow. And as soon as he does that, Thratic looks in his direction. So the surprise element or the sneak attack is gone. So now it's just going to be a standard attack. So he snuck over there and he's trying to make an attack from Thratic. So in this case, he is going to take his short bow and attack him. And here I'm going to attack by dropping the attack right on the token. It is a 13, which hits. And he takes 2 more points of damage. So what's the sound he makes, George?
Sorry.
I asked what's the sound that he makes. He gets hit by
Damage.
another arrow. Okay, so so Thratic actually grunts, and he's kind of in a triage kind of situation. He's not sure who to go after first, but since there's a guy that's close to him, which is a lot closer, the guy that tried to sneak up on him, he takes his full movement and tries to basically close the gap. And Thratic actually has some unique weapons because he's a gladiator. So he has a little bit more different offense than most of these other players do. So I'm going to pull up his character sheet. And he has a net that he can throw. So he has a disadvantage for throwing the net, but if it lands, it will create a condition of being restrained. So he's going to try to restrain this guy, so that buys him time to decide whether he wants to attack him or allow Balric to get closer to him to defeat him. So we'll see what happens. So he's going to try this net attack, which is a thrown weapon. And it doesn't do any damage, but it creates a condition of incapacitation. So he's going to throw the net. He has 2 of them. So he's going to throw it. Oops. It's a hit. So he was successful. He flings this net up and over, and it lands right on top of the goblin and kind of entangles him at the edge of this tree here.
Ah,
And
fuck.
yeah, that's what the goblin's doing. So now
Wow.
goblin number 1 is now incapacitated or restrained. So what I'm going to do
Balls.
is click on the effects. And if you look over here to the right, I have Rob Tui's effects coding here. So anything you could possibly want would be over here, or you can use the built-in one. So in this case, I'm going to say that he's restrained. So I'm going to actually drag this effect over on the Goblin 1. Or if I was smart, I could have actually built an effect here for that, in which I already have. See, I didn't have to do that. I could have used this special here, which is his bolas and his nets, and not had to have done that. But anyway, so he makes the restrained effect on this goblin. So that messes his turn up if he tries to go next round. So Thratic is done with that move, and he's just going to continue climbing up to take care of this individual. And there's an embankment here. It's roughly about 5 feet up. I don't think Thratic's going to have any problem scaling that, but I'm going to go ahead and make an athletics check for him to jump up there on the embankment. So he has his skills, and for his athletics check, I'm going to go ahead and roll that in the dice tower. And he did very well. He just plants his hands and leaps up onto that embankment, and that ends his turn. So he's engaging the goblin that's restrained now. Okay. Belric, your turn.
All right. He turns to Thratic before he starts to make his move toward this other goblin most closest to him and says, with all those stupid little tricks, try not to get yourself killed. And
Shut up, fool.
so he is going to attempt to go up this way. So I will make my athletics roll in the tower.
And that's only a few feet up, but being that dwarves are kind of short, you're going to need to do that roll.
Mm-hmm. So athletics. Dun, dun, dun.
Very good. So as you race over to that embankment, you take half of your movement rate to get up it, basically, but you were able to do so successfully without any issue. So your little legs pedal you right up the side of that embankment and towards the goblin. So you want to do anything else? You've already made a move.
Right. You know what? I will click those. I'm going to take one of my hand axes and I'm going to launch it at him, see if I can't hit him.
Okay, so on the modifiers there, you're going to throw it through those bushes or the trees. So he has partial cover at least. So go ahead and do the -2 for your attack.
Okay.
So he's going to click on the -2 on the tabletop. So on his side of the character scene, he's going to click the -2. And even with that, he just basically launches that thing right through the trees, breaking little branches and chopping down leaves, and basically toasts that goblin in one fell swoop. The axe goes right into his throat and nearly severs his head off his shoulders right through the trees. So that takes care of that goblin. So now that goblin's dead. So I can remove him from the combat tracker if I want, so that it doesn't take so long to cycle through all the combatants. It'll just make an extra stop there. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the goblin from the combat tracker.
Okay.
Now, if I had intentions to heal that goblin, I would have left it there, but there's no one around to heal the goblin. So I took him off. So does that end your turn, or do you want to do anything else? Do you have any
Uh,
bonus actions, or
yeah, that'll end my turn. There is a comment in the chat. It says, Mike inside, was Laroon saying that the effect window is a custom coded module? If so, how would one note the restrain condition if you didn't own that module?
okay, I will bring that up.
God damn it, I always get stuck.
So this is an effects section that comes with Fantasy Grounds. So all the conditions on the left come with Fantasy Grounds. So that's not custom. So when I dragged over the restrained effect, all I had to do was drop it on the guy who's restrained, and it's a done deal. However, if I was to actually code that, in which I did, and I had forgotten when I actually pulled up the character sheet that Thratic had, I actually have it coded on this character because I knew that this would come up in fighting in battle. So Thratic does have those skills or those specials on his character sheet. Now, being that he may have already performed it, they may have disappeared, or it wasn't coded correctly. But nonetheless, you can make those codes on the character sheet in this case. So he could have applied the special attack, and he would have also been able to roll for the goblin to make a strength check to break out of the net. So that's the other thing that would be coded onto this character sheet to make things easier on the DM. And as you can see, I have a bola and a net. So the net does have a strength check requirement. So once it gets to the goblin's turn, I'm going to make the strength check for the goblin. But the effect itself, the restrained effect, is already over there in the effects. And I did it manually so you guys can see how that works. But technically, I could have used the effects that were coded on my sheet. And those are very much like what Rob 2E does for the community in his effects coding package. So that makes it easier on the DM. So technically, I wouldn't even had to have done that had someone been playing this character and they knew their character well enough to say, hey, I already have that coded on my sheet, let me handle it, and that would have been it. So there we go. Thratic has made his attack already, and it's Uranus's turn. So I'm going to bring up Uranus's character sheet. So he's on the map up to the north of that wagon, and he's going to deal with that goblin that's straight ahead of him. And he actually heard the goblin shooting that bow at him, so that really aggravated him. So his character sheet also has actions on it like the rest. And in this case, we have Hunter's Mark. And I know Rob knows this because this is one of the attacks that drives people nuts because it doesn't always work properly. And it actually has a shift drag function. So in order for this to work correctly, I have to hold the shift button and I drug it over to the goblin. So he is using his Hunter's Mark ability on the goblin too. Now that, if you don't perform the shift and the drag, it will not apply the effect correctly. So you can see it's got Hunter's Mark, which is concentration on him, on actual Uranus, but it is also has this NPC marked. So this is a good example of the shift drag variation. And in this coding here is fairly old. If you have Rob's updated version, it will say SD on there, which flags you to use the shift drag technique. And there's only a handful of spells or special abilities that use it. And you won't really know how that's done unless you played Fantasy Grounds for a while. But if you read Rob Tui's coding effects intro, the actual module or the story entry, all the abbreviations and acronyms are there to help you understand what all these little codes mean in the effects. So that's another thing that is helpful for DM because it already has all these things on there. And as a matter of fact, Uranus doesn't have some of his abilities enabled. So technically he should have his Fey ancestry applied to him, which he has advantage on saving throws from being charmed, and sleep spells will not work. So that's something that as a player you would have to keep in mind. And humanoids are this guy's favorite enemy. So he can, in effect, do more damage to this character. So it is part of his heritage and part of his class feature. So I'm going to apply this as his advanced survival skill for the action. So any skills that he would make, this being Uranus, would be at advantage. Or any skill checks that involved intelligence would be at advantage. Well, he already kind of has made the determination of what kind of goblin this is. So I don't really need to do that, but I could have used that if he was doing some skill checks. But in this case, he actually gets to do an additional 2 points of piercing damage to his prey. So if he hits, I'm going to apply this extra damage as well. So he's got the hunter's mark on him, and now he's going to actually target the goblin. So Uranus now has hunter's mark, his Fey ancestry is active like it should be now, and he's going to target this goblin. And the way you target in Fantasy Grounds is, besides just dropping the attack on the creature, and he's mainly going to be facing off with this creature himself. You would click the left control key and target the goblin, or you can do it in the combat tracker by going to Uranus, clicking the target icon in the combat tracker. This is Goblin 2. So Uranus could target this character by dragging that target up onto the goblin. So I'm going to stretch the combat tracker out so I have more real estate. And this time I'm going to target. So right now he already has that goblin targeted because I did the left control. So I'm going to remove the target for now, and I'll show you how to target manually from the combat tracker. So I'm going to click targets, and I'm going to drag this little target onto goblin number 2 right on this token here. And now it shows that goblin 2 is targeted. So this is something you have to get used to as a DM, is learning how to target, how to remove effects or apply effects based on what's happening in the particular combat section. And this will go a little bit faster because I have to stop and explain and you guys have questions and things. But when you're actually playing, you might get some player questions, or you might get people in the game that say, hey, you can't do that, or things like that. So that's part of playing and learning and working together as a group. So don't be discouraged if you have some suggestions by your players. Sure, you might be a little irritated, but you got to kind of roll along with it and figure out how to do this stuff. And not everyone knows everything, so just keep that in mind. All right, so back to this. Uranus has Hunter's Mark on this guy. That's his special feature from his class. And then he also has favorite enemy from his class, because humanoids, Goblin is one of them. And then he also is going to attack with his longbow. So let's go ahead and do that. So this guy's already targeted, this Goblin 2. So Uranus has Goblin 2 down here targeted. So you can see in this little cell, it tells you. And now he's going to make his attack roll, in which all I have to do is click on this die roll here. So I double clicked. It's a 15. I think that hits. Why, yes, it does. And so now I'm going to roll the damage. So what I can do is double click the damage from the character sheet, since that goblin's already been hit and has been targeted. So he blew that goblin away. That arrow went right through him, and it killed
Oh
that
my
goblin in
goodness.
one shot. And
Wow.
it did 1d8 plus the 1d6 because of the hunter's mark. And I haven't even applied the +2 to piercing damage that he received from the favored enemy.
Yeah. Wow. That's
So
overkill by what,
yeah,
5?
so
No,
that
4.
guy's toast.
Yeah.
So the arrow flew from his from his bow, true, and shot right through the goblin. And before the goblin could respond, he looked down. And he had this huge hole in his stomach, and he just crumples over and dies. So
Man.
that's what happened to that guy. So he's toast. Now we have to go to the next person in line for the next turn. And so Aranis is not going to do anything else but continue to guard this vicinity. So he's going to draw another arrow and wait to see what happens in the battle. He may come forward a little bit to kind of keep an eye on these two and provide them cover in case from a distance. So that's his turn. He's going to move up a little, and he's going to survey the battle, and that's the end of his turn. Watua, she sees all this stuff going on, and she seems to be having trouble with these oxen. So I'm going to have her do an animal handling check, even though it's not her specialty. Because right now they're getting very agitated by the combat. So I'm going to set the difficulty rating in my head. I'm going to say if she rolls at least a 10 or higher, she can calm these things down. But being that these oxen are not accustomed to combat, I'm going to raise the bar to 12. So she has to beat a 12 or higher. So I'm going to go to her skills. Animal handling, not her specialty, but she does get a +1 from her wisdom bonus. So she has a fair chance. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the dice tower. Okay, so here's animal handling. She's attempting to control the oxen so they don't just go willy-nilly on her. The animal handling skill is actually defined here. So if you weren't sure what it does, you can pop it up and it'll say, if there's any question whether you calm down a domesticated animal, keep them out from getting spooked, or intuit an animal's intentions, the DM might call for a wisdom or animal handling check. You also make a wisdom or animal handling check to control your mount if you or when you attempt a risky maneuver. So that's what she's doing. She's trying to keep things calm with the animals. So she's calling out to the oxen, even though she doesn't know them very well. And she's going to make her animal handling check in this dice tower. She failed. Yikes.
Uh-oh.
So what I would do is describe to her, Watua, is despite your efforts for trying to control the oxen, they are beginning to pull the cart in a random direction. So I really don't know which way they're going, but probably straight ahead, being that I doubt they're going to try to climb the embankment on either side. So now they are pulling the wagon against her will. So I don't know what their movement rate is, but I imagine it's not too fast. So I say probably by the end of the round, they'll be right in this area. So now they are starting to move on their own accord. And if I had this set up correctly, I could have a token that would move instead of being stationary. So with that in mind, I'm going to find myself a token to represent the positioning of the cart. So that seems like a very kind kind of almost an unnecessary thing, but once in a while you come into situations like this where you kind of have to be prepared for the inevitable or for the unimaginable. So now I do have said cart token right here in my tokens. I've actually organized these so I can use these in my campaign. So in this case, I'm going to use the cart token. You see how that it didn't really work because it wasn't assigned to anything? Well, that's because I didn't have it set up properly, and it's not a token for anything in particular now. So I would technically need to set up an NPC, a blank one, and assign that token and treat it as if it was a monster, even though it's not. So there's no way that I can actually just place this token on the map and have it scaled properly without being assigned to the correct thing. See, none of these are sticking very well, but you can see there's a horse here, in which I'm going to delete it. And here's the cart here. See how big it is? So now I have another instance of this cart. I'm going to just pretend that this isn't here. If I wanted to be really funny, I could have rolled an 8-sided or a 4-sided dice to determine the direction that these oxen were going to go when she mishandled the roll. So I'm going to do that. I think it's interesting. It may be a lot of extra fudging about, but I think it makes a funner story. So I'm going to roll a secret roll in the dice tower and determine which direction that these oxen go. So in this axis, in these quadrants here, I'm going to assign numbers. So 1 will be here, which is backwards basically. So that means they're going to try to turn around and back the cart up right towards Uranus. Or they're going to try to go over to this embankment, or to this embankment, or straight ahead. So let's see what they do. Okay, I'm going to roll it in the dice tower. It's a 4, so they're going straight ahead. So basically, that's where the cart is, with Watua in it. So that's the end of her turn and the end of this. So Belric, you see the oxen cart moving, and you hear Watua shouting at the oxen, "You stupid beasts! Stop!"
Stupid beasts.
Okay, goblin number 3. He's nearby. He hears the screams of his companions, and he's not sure what to do. But since he thinks that he still has the advantage on Thratic, being that his attention is away, he's going to make another attack. And he hit. This time, Thratic got it in the back, and that really pissed him off, and now he has a total of 16 points of damage. I mean, this has been adding up over time. Plus, he was damaged from a previous fight. So he is hurting pretty bad. He screams out in agony as that arrow kind of shanks him in the back on his shoulder blade. So that really pissed him off. Goblin number 1 is pretty much a done deal if he can't break out of that net. So I'm going to roll from Thratic's character sheet. And this is going to be the net roll. He failed. He actually, in this case, I don't have the critical failures or the critical attacks or the double attacks. So being that he basically was entangled, I'm going to add another round to the amount of time he's restrained. And he actually hurt himself by trying to rip out the net with his hands, so he received a cut across his palms. So I'm going to manually apply 1 point of damage. So the NPC that tried to break free of the net, he rolled a 1. So I'm just going to consider that a failure, but he also did a point of damage to himself, and he's now further entangled into that mess. So that ends his turn. Thratic. Okay, so he has the upper hand on this goblin, but seeing that this goblin is pretty much incapacitated and basically hurting himself, he's just going to run over and kick that goblin as hard as he can. So in this case, he's going to make
Get out of my yard.
He's going to make basically an unarmed attack. So I don't have that coded on the sheet. I probably should have. But being that, I'm the DM, I can make up whatever I want. I'm going to just go ahead and roll an attack roll based on an unarmed strike. So I think what I'll do is just go ahead and attack him with a weapon, but it will not do the damage of the weapon. So I'll use one of these attacks. So I think I'll use just the trident, but it says 1d6. But if you notice, all the attacks here are +5. So basically, I'm just gonna do a straight melee attack, in which it does hit, but instead of applying the damage from this particular attack from the hand axe or whatever he used, I'm going to go ahead and roll just a manual 1d4. So this is the kind of improvisation that you have to also be ready for, or basically, in other words, you're not prepared, you need to know what to do type thing. And that's the case here. So I wasn't prepared to make an unarmed attack, but I kind of wanted to make the story a little bit more interesting. Instead of him just finishing the goblin off, he goes up and he puts his foot into him as hard as he can. So let's see what kind of damage he does. Okay, so I'm going to roll in the dice tower. It's a 3. So I'm going to manually apply the 3 points of damage. So now that goblin's hurt pretty bad. So he let out a big yelp.
Yelp.
And he is not in good shape. And Thratic screams his battle cry of his ancient orcish heritage. So he is very mad, and he takes out his trident, and he grabs it two-handedly and is preparing to impale this goblin, because he's just taking his frustration out on him now. So he's kind of lost his cool. So that ends as his turn. So now it's Uranus again. So Uranus isn't really going to do anything but try to run and catch up to the oxen and help her, or Watua, with the oxen. So here we go. He's going to do his animal handling check at a disadvantage because he's kind of walking or running with them. So I'm going to click disadvantage, and then I'm going to go ahead and roll for him. To bring up his character sheet, I just double clicked on his icon, and I'm going to make the attack, or excuse me, the skill check. So this is going to be animal handling. Now his chances are much higher. So he's going to roll this in the chat. So, or excuse me, in the dice tower. So here we go. Even though he had disadvantage, he still beat a 10 or a 12, so it's a 13. So he actually manages to soothe these oxen and get them to stop. And so he has done his turn by helping Watua control the oxen. He's a lot better with animals than she is. They, in fact, think she's a bitch.
That's charming.
Okay, Balric. So you are up on the battle now. You have a vantage point of the battle scene.
Okay, well, I'm going to start hoofing it down toward Goblin number 3 as fast as my little stubby dwarven legs can carry me.
You're gonna hoof it? Hoofing it?
Okay, go for it. So you have 25 feet of movement.
So right about there, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, close enough. And yeah, I'm still too far to do anything to that goblin, but I will yell out to the goblin, hopefully to get his attention.
Oi,
Mhm.
smart ass, get your fat ass over
All right. So that
Yeah,
takes.
you seem manly enough to shoot somebody in the back. Well, how about you see if you can fight me fair face to face?
Indeed.
And that will
here.
be it
Fight
for
me,
me.
fool.
All right. So with that reaction, he kind of looks over his shoulder and he's wondering what to do. He's kind of freaked out because he sees his buddy in trouble and he just shot an arrow at this guy and enraged him. So I think the only thing that he can do is sit there and try to ponder his next reaction because it's Watua's turn. And Watua is just trying to keep the oxen under control with Arana, so she's preoccupied. Goblin 3 is right here. I think he's going to turn and try to shoot at the Balric Stonefist dwarf. Now, he may not have line of sight, so we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to go ahead and target Balric. And now Balric is targeted. It says here. And it's 45 feet, and you can see this brush kind of gets in the way. So he's going to make a arrow or a bow and arrow attack, but it's partial cover. So I'm going to put -2. And he's going to make the attack against the dwarf. And so let's see what happens. It's a miss. So he zings the bow and it kind of trails through this brush here. You see a bunch of leaves flying off, but it makes the arrow fall short. So Belric, you see a black feathered shaft of the bow and arrow set that you recognize so well fall short. So the arrow has fallen right at your feet because they hit the branches in front.
I yell out, "Ha! I've seen hill giants that can throw pebbles with better aim than that."
So Goblin 1 is still restrained, and being that he rolled that 1, he does not get to make a strength check this round. So he is entangled. So until the next round, he cannot do anything. Thratic, it's his turn. He has the advantage on this guy. If he doesn't finish this goblin, this is going to be epic.
Hey, Goblin, I got a present for you. Nibble, nibble.
So with two hands, he takes out his, he had his trident out. He's going to basically fork this goblin.
Fork him in the face.
It's a hit. With all his strength, he just comes right down on top of the goblin through the net. And he takes that goblin out, no problem.
Instant death.
So blood starts spurting out of the goblin as it falls to the ground, or as it lays prone, and it stops its struggle in the net. And he growls in victory. Aranis looks over his shoulder and sees that the situation is in hand. Balric, your chance to go.
All right.
It's actually Balric.
Yeah. Okay, I can get to there. And I will chuck my other hand axe at this one since the first one went so well. I will go ahead and try it again. All right. one.
Okay.
There we go. That's enough.
So the axe flies hand over haft and misses the goblin. He kind of moves out of the way as the um, hand axe crashes into the bushes next to him. So the
Okay.
goblin did his thing.
Yep. And that will be it for me then, sir.
Okay. Well, Tua says, will you finish him already?
No, I'm ready for dinner.
So, in frustration, she goes ahead and casts her spell that she had been preparing in the first place. So she's going to go to her actions list. And she's going to say, well, this is a job for a woman, I take it.
How rude.
So, with her mighty sorcery, she strikes the goblin with a volley of magic missiles, and they are a purplish blue color. So those magic missiles streaked from her hands and pelted the goblin in the chest, in the shoulder, and right in the face. So that
Nice.
goblin
In the
is
face.
toast.
Nice.
Right in the face.
So now the party has been victorious, and the combat is now pretty much resolved. And that only took 3 rounds in actual combat, which is just like nothing. It's like, what, 24 seconds or something like that?
Yeah, something
But
like that.
in actuality, we have spent a good solid almost, hour and a half. So whenever you do a combat, you can expect to basically spend a good hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on how complex it is. I think it would have been a little shorter if we would have been prepared and we had more players operating the other characters. So is there any questions on how that combat went?
Anybody? Nobody.
If I would have had one more turn at combat, I was going to take dang it, person in the chat whose name is not the name that's on the screen, but he said his actual name.
Okay.
Can't find it. Oh crap! Come on. I know.
Can't find it.
Oh.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, walking dude. I was going to yell out "spoon" for my war cry.
Spoon.
Yeah, from the tick.
I was gonna say spoonage.
So that concludes the encounter for Lost Mines of Phandelver. There could be some roleplay, some aftermath, maybe a couple coins found if you want. There is a entry that talks about saving one of the goblins so that they can get more information. But in this case, it was a TP or a TNK, a total NPC kill in this combat. So there was no quarter in this battle. So you could award these individuals experience points, give them a little bit of information after the combat. And so I think the next stream will cover how to reward these characters properly with the party tracker, which is here. And so the next stream or the next tutorial will continue this on, and we will also cover doing the custom maps and these custom tokens that I was using earlier. So these are some of the things that we'll cover in the next class, where we'll do some customization, we'll do the aftermath of the battle, and then we'll continue on to the next town, and that will be the end of the part 3 of the series. So join us next week, same time, same place, and hopefully the same guest. And try not to be late or too early. So, so is there any final questions in the chat?
No, there is not. But I would like to say, I did put out in the chat earlier, if you have any suggestions for any tutorial videos that either me or Leroon or other people can make for the the class a little easier, the college more navigational, have the video GPS, so to speak, to find out what you need to know and find.
GPS, go there, be square.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just PM me or PM Laroon, so we can try to get
Don't
those
PM
videos
me.
out. Yeah, don't PM George. But we just want to make things as easy and as accessible as we can for the students and other teachers too, because like Laroon was saying earlier, he doesn't know everything. So maybe a tutorial made by somebody from the community might enlighten him. So yeah, any questions, stuff like that, just throw them out to us, and we'll try to answer them as best as we
We'll
can.
try.
We will do. Yeah, so we'll make these encounters more complete and more, I want to say, prepared when you run it a few times. So when you get used to running this module, I would run it a few more times until you get comfortable with all the different aspects and the customization that you can provide. I mean, it's endless. So I want you to consider making this one of your modules to start with if you haven't already, and utilize this tutorial and any other things you pick up from the college or from abroad that would give you the sense of how to run the encounters. And this is something that I really want to focus on in the college, is to get more DMs confident in running the game, and also to show them that it's not as bad as it sounds. And actually, it probably is, because
Trust
actually
me,
this.
the day I had my first ever, like,
Oh,
fuck, I've done
awesome.
everything wrong.
Yeah, so you can do everything wrong, but I don't know what wrong or right is. I just know if it's fun and it has some description to it, and everybody at the table participates, it'll be okay.
Yep, go
And
with it.
and these streams here will get better over time. I'm still getting used to how it's set up. And if anybody hates this layout here with
Deal with
the
it.
background, either deal with it or make a comment in the stream or in private in the college, because this is an overlay that I've been trying to play around with, and it makes the screen a little bit smaller. So just kind of a heads up for the stream. So any questions from my fellow streamers?
No, but Mike Inside says, how long will it take to upload this stream to YouTube so he can
Not that
review it?
really long. Depends on their internet, really.
It probably will go up late tonight. It takes about an hour or two, so probably in a couple hours at the earliest.
Yeah.
Well, if you exclude me, it normally takes me 5 hours plus editing.
Right. I don't edit the video, so
Yeah.
it should only take a couple hours. And it should be available for you tomorrow if it's late where you're at now.
Okay. And he says, thank you for the tutorial, and that is awesome. Yeah, Mike, just I'll probably be over in the Discord chat for the college for a while, so if you have any questions, just
in the college,
hop on over there, and I'll try to get you. We'll try to get you squared away.
All right. So I think we're going to end the stream. George, do you have anything you want to say?
No. Nothing
Okay.
I want to disclose.
All right. So George is actually designing his own game. And if you see him in the chat and he's ready, he will summon you if you're interested.
Oh, God.
And he will try to test his game out. So just putting that out there. So just putting that out there.
All
right.
Thanks.
I'm trying to push him into doing his own thing, and he's doing it. So this is a good way for him to test his material.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, have a good night. Thanks for joining us. These will get better over time, and I'm going to keep teaching DMs until I can't teach anymore. So take care, everyone. Good night. And I'm going to join Atua's game in the college right after this. So take care, you guys.
Later.
Don't kill him.